how many messages you have and how much you have going on.
It is a busy time. Should I be wearing a jacket instead, or nobody cares on this? Okay. Just making sure.
No, this is not CNN. No
Okay.
worries. Okay. I think we are live now. Yes? Okay, great. So we are here with candidates with a contract signer, Nick Thomas, who's running as an independent in Colorado's 2nd District. And we could start out with you talking about why you decided to run as an independent.
Sure, happy to. So Nick Thomas, and the way to reach me, either follow the link to our Facebook. We'd love your like and following in this last 19 days. And no matter where you are across the country, I think we've been given one of the two best chances of victory for a U.S. House seat as an independent in this election in the United States. And the other one is Marty. So shout out to him. I hope you can get him on your program as well. He's running up in Maine. And one of the reasons that he actually has such a solid chance is because they have ranked choice voting up in. And of course, as I'm sure we'll get into, that's a huge thing. And that's something that I am actually fighting to bring to Colorado amongst many, many other people, which is wonderful. It's legal in our state, but not obviously heavily utilized. Aspen actually briefly had it and kind of messed it up a little bit, which is amazing. But there are 6 little areas in Colorado, including Telluride, who do use it, who do implement it. And we think we're going to get it on Pueblo's ballot in January. And Pueblo, for those who don't know Colorado very well, is a big city. And if we can get it on Pueblo's and then maybe Denver and Aurora in June, maybe we can bring it to the state. I'd love to see it in 2020, but probably 2022. And as really inside politics, for those who really don't know Colorado, sorry to bore you, we are one of these growing states. We have the highest number of registered voters in the United States. 2, the highest voter turnout in the United States. So it's a great place for ranked choice voting. But 3, because of this population boom, we will also get at least an 8th seat in this coming census, possibly a 9th, unlikely, I think, but we are going to get an 8th seat. So we're going to go from 7 to 8, which will completely change everything. And in the meantime, we are fighting to pass, for us, amendments Y and Z, which will basically set up, I mean, I'm not even getting into my ballot. I'm getting already on our stuff, but let's get to Y and Z later, but ask me about that. So Nick Thomas, it's nickthomasforcongress.com. I decided to run because we needed it, because I saw the need. And the moment I saw the need was last year in June. I was out in Washington, D.C., citizen lobbying for USGLC, which is the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, which lobbies on behalf of the International Affairs budget and invite people from across the country out who care about that to one of those normal 2-day lobbying sessions where they teach you how to do it. But a bunch of us came out and said this is critical that we keep intact the International Affairs budget. And that's a bipartisan initiative. And it happened to be also the same time as this shooting at the baseball game. For those viewers who don't know, somebody walked up to the Republican practice field and said, "Are you the Democrats or are you the Republicans?" And when one of the aides walking away said, "Oh, these are the Republicans," he drew his weapon and opened fire on the field. And when I heard about that, I happened to be at the Capitol, which went on a minor lockdown. And when I heard about what happened there, I thought, my God, in a sense, you have to assume that if the alternative had happened, if somebody had walked away and said, "Oh, this is Democrats," this guy might have walked away. So it wasn't just a random shooting. It was somebody from one team believing that the other team was so wrong or evil or whatever else due to our society, to our culture, to our media, that he felt that he couldn't talk to the other side. He had to open fire on them. And I thought, you know what? The most important thing I can do right now is go back to my district and run as an independent. It's the best way I can serve my community. We haven't had one in a couple decades. It's time. So.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, that story right there. It's sad how much we treat politics as team sports, and the media does that. I mean, it's just fueling the division. So I'm always excited to talk to the independent candidates. Actually, I wanted, before I forget, what you were talking about with the changes that are being made in Colorado and how engaged people are. I was looking at some numbers earlier, but I did see that just this year that the primaries were open. Was it Prop 108 that you had a closed primary? Does that apply to all primaries from here on out? You've changed to an open primary system, or let's see. It says, yeah, it was the first chance Colorado voters unaffiliated that were registered and unaffiliated were able to vote one or the other. So yeah, it looks like that just happened this year.
Yeah. So. No, that was actually backed by Kent 30, who is also running Y&Z right now.
Okay.
And it's a big step. So it doesn't necessarily help me. It's it was almost slightly detrimental because in a sense, running as an independent, it was almost slightly detrimental in the sense that people saw me on the ballot, or saw the other two on the ballot, the Democrats and the Republicans, but they didn't see my name. And as we know, in politics, the number of names, it helps the name recognition.
Right.
So that's a big thing. But far more importantly, it was a big step in the right direction for Colorado, and I totally support it. And you're right. What it basically allowed was for anyone who wanted to vote in a primary but felt more independent to not have to be registered with one major party or the other anymore, which is significant.
Right.
And hopefully we'll expand on that.
Well, especially with the numbers. I mean, now we've got, I think this is January 2018 Gallup poll, independents 44% across the country, Democrats 32%, and Republicans 22%. Now, I think that that meaning of independent is kind of changing. And I think it used to always be that if someone was unaffiliated or called themselves an independent, I think that at least the connotation was that they were centrist, probably kind of right-leaning, maybe a little bit of libertarian flavoring to it, right? At least I know I'm in North Carolina, and that's how it is. But I think that perceptions of that are changing as people all across the board are just getting sick of the two-party system. So independent is coming to mean something different. I do want to point out, and I wonder if you could speak on this. There's a group, I'm sure maybe you're a part of this, Unite America?
Yes.
Okay. So I happen to notice, and I hate identity politics, but it's, part of the system. So, you look and you see it is a lot of white guys. So, how do we change that, like, going forward? There's got to be, like, more inclusive to more people, because unfortunately, people will use that against the whole independent movement, I think. So, do you want to speak on that, any?
Sure. So, no, I'm not endorsed by Unite America. They haven't looked at U.S. House races.
Okay.
Their goal was, and I support them. Here's my thing. First of all, there are a lot of organizations out there that care about this kind of thing. And I believe that some I'm going to feel closer to in policy, some not quite as close in policy. Right. But if they're generally doing the right thing and getting us in the right direction, then it's, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
And so I love what Unite America is doing, and I think it's really funny that they moved from D.C. to Denver because they felt that our state house was one of the most divided. So, yeah, but I've had conversations with some of the most liberal of people who have said, oh, no, they're clearly, discontented Republicans who are upset with Trump and are basically trying to find another path. And then I was just on the phone with one of the most conservative guys in our state the other day. We talk with everybody. We try to reach out to everybody. I was trying to get on his show. he mentioned that, oh no, they're clearly, I know the donors there, and they're clearly a liberal group that's just trying to target the Republicans. I thought, no. So, I mean, we get it from both sides. I've gotten it from both sides.
Right.
I've gotten from the Democrats that he was recruited by the Republicans because it's a safe blue seat, and I get from the Republicans that, well, he's clearly, socially progressive, so he's clearly just a Democrat. So this is how we treat anybody who's running in a segment we don't fully understand.
Right.
We try to brand people.
Exactly.
With Unite America, yes, it is mainly white and male. And certainly that is a problem. It's actually the same problem that Our Revolution was given early on. Our Revolution being Bernie's group. Early on, when it was created in Vermont, it was primarily white men. And, on one hand, great. Get everybody who can involved. And if there's a bunch of white guys who want to get involved, great. But that does not do a proper job of reaching out and giving us that full tent and being inclusive to everyone. And so I believe they have taken steps to try to become a little more incorporating. I'm not sure what those are. Again, I haven't worked with United America. I can't speak on that behalf, but I will say simply, your message is correct. We need any of these groups. One, they need to be not controlling. I've seen some groups come along and say, hey, we need to break away from the two parties because the party system isn't working, and then sort of create their own party and try to establish ownership.
No, that's...
Which was like the Puritans coming over to the United States and looking for freedom of religion, and then saying, well, if you're not agreeing with my freedom of religion, then we're going to crucify you.
Right. So, no, independent is independent. And I think the danger, could be, or, it shouldn't be that it's a bridge. It becomes a bridge between the two parties where you end up getting this kind of lukewarm middle that looks like Tim Kaine. I think that's not the answer. Right. We've had a couple really progressive, there's that word, I'm curious how that word rings in Colorado. But we've had progressive candidates like Tim Canova and Sander Hicks that left the Democratic Party to run as independents, and they're definitely not.
I know him well.
Oh, do you? Yeah, he's great.
So.
We got to talk to him one night. That was a great conversation.
You're talking about the gentleman out of New York.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. He's a fellow Quaker.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's got a radio show and does 1,000 things. He was fantastic. But anyway, he's definitely not a Republican light. So I think independent, it really has the meaning it should, which is independent of all labels, and hopefully it encourages people to just stick to the issues. So I definitely, we might be jumping around a bit here, but I saw your interview on TYT, and I'm fascinated with this proxy vote. I had not heard about it. I can't believe I hadn't heard about it. I've heard of something called Me Vote, which is out of Australia, and I think it's basically the same thing, but it's where people can vote directly on issues. But if I'm skipping around too much, feel free to go back, or if you want to jump into that and maybe explain that a little bit. I think that's a great solution to a lot of our problems, that proxy vote.
And I'm known for my tangents as well. So I'll say I'll post a link to our Young Turks talk as well, because it actually was a really good conversation. Or if one of you guys are on the Facebook feed, please post a link to that. But Cenk, I want to give him credit to having an independent on in a safe blue. His opinions all obviously lean a little bit left.
Just a little.
So that alone was awesome that he was open. Sorry, what?
Oh, I said just a little. Yeah. I'm a former TYT viewer, but we don't have to go into that right now. But go ahead.
So I loved him bringing on an independent, because we do get shut out of a number of events. We do get shut out of, the NPR affiliate here in Colorado, CPR, put up a thing 2 days ago, with our Democrat and our Republican, not me. And I'll say, let me stop right there and tell everybody, in my district, this is not just, we're not just falling on our sword for an idea, although that's what we're preaching, but this is winnable. When I got into this race, I didn't just do it for the heck of, stating a case. It's because in CD2, one, we have an open seat. Jared Polis, Congressman Jared Polis, has held this seat for the last 9 years, and he is currently the Democratic nominee for governor in Colorado, and he's actually up on the Republican by about 11 points. So if that holds, he's the next governor of Colorado. And the numbers in the seat, as you were talking about, are 209,000 registered independent or unaffiliated.
I see that.
175,000 registered Dems. So I actually joke with them, this may be a safe blue seat because we think in a duopoly, but in reality, they're splitting my vote. And I give them a little chuckle all the time on that. And then 133,000 Republicans.
Right.
And so it's a seat that, one, the independents are the majority. But two, you can tell that people on both sides have not had their voices heard.
Right.
The Republicans haven't had a representative in 42 years. And in fact, the Democrat, as he campaigns, it is purely Democratic room fundraisers and then a smattering of forums, never a debate. So a couple forums and then Democratic fundraisers. He doesn't talk to the other side. So the Republicans haven't had a voice in 40 years. And the Democrats, in reality, haven't had a voice either, because we have a rigged primary system where he was the anointed candidate who was chosen. Jared launched his gubernatorial on a Sunday, and within 2 days, I believe, the Democrat had his campaign launched by Tuesday with a full website, with 120 endorsers on the website, with like a skeleton team already intact. I mean, it was very clearly an inside job, and I don't think that was exactly his fault. I think the Democratic Party did him a major disservice by rolling it out like that. They were trying to scare off the competition, but you want competition.
Right.
We want to have the voices. So in a
well,
sense,
they don't.
I mean, well, in a sense, it means that even with the Democrats, even if you ignore the independents and you ignore the Republicans, the Democrats have had their voices silenced again, and they don't get to choose. He may be the best choice, but how could they possibly figure that out?
Right.
And they won't get another choice for at least another probably 6 to 12 years, as is the normal person for our district.
Right. Well, just the district a couple over from you, I guess that's Denver. District 6 was the whole... that Levi Tilleman, Steny Hoyer thing. I'm sure you know all about that.
It was. I actually, I went to see Fahrenheit 11/9 because of Levi Tillman, who invited me along to that the other day, the Wednesday before it started. He's a good guy. So
how was that movie?
Oh man, it's so good.
Okay.
It is so good. Because here's the thing. Michael Moore, who in some movies has come across as clearly one-sided or partisan, this is easily his best movie since Roger and Me. When he first got into the whole thing for a reason, rather than just a partisan thing.
Right.
And you got to see this movie because he does skew 45 for all the terrible things that 45 has done. But then he skews Obama and the Democrats. And we were at he brought me along, he had a ticket for clearly a Democratic event, and a pretty left-wing Democratic event. And yet when I walked out afterwards, I've told a couple people this, I was so impacted by that film because it calls out Obama for his response to Flint. It calls out the Democratic Party for what they did to Bernie. And love him or hate him, that's not how you handle that.
Right.
And so I come out of this movie and I'm just trying to take it all in. I'm standing outside of this thing, like just trying to digest what I've just seen, and waiting for Levi, who's taking photos with people, because turns out he's in the movie. So I'm waiting out there, and a couple women walk out, and they're talking to each other. And one turns to the other and says, "It wasn't as good as I thought." And I thought, did you see the same movie? And then I suddenly realized oh, you're not comfortable with your tribe being attacked, are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You are not. I mean, just
Yeah.
it is really amazing
Yep.
that so many people can be out there rallying and angry
Mm-hmm.
and this
Mm-hmm.
and that because I'm right and you're wrong, and we're good and you're evil,
Yes.
and we're doing everything perfect and you're doing every single thing wrong,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we're breaking.
And
that
it.
tribal mentality is really a problem. And until we figure out how to get past it, we're really in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was Bernie's campaign, I think, that and what happened in 2016 that opened a lot of people's eyes to how things really were going. And then you hear stories about the Steny Hoyer, the tape, and no one. That's not a democracy.
No, certainly
So
it's not.
right. Okay. So let's see. I'm
going to say one last
Oh, sure.
negative thing for you, and then we'll change the subject to some more positive things.
Yes.
Okay.
On that topic, now I have a lot of friends on a lot of different. I'm trying to share your thing to my page at the same time, so my
Oh,
apologies.
sure. No problem.
I have a lot of friends on every side. I've been an independent for life. In the old days, growing up in Colorado, I worked for a libertarian Democrat as his aide here in the state of Colorado, while at the same time helping the Republicans, the college Republicans up at CSU, found a Republican newspaper. When the college newspaper went a little to the left, because I believe you have to have differing viewpoints. So, and there's a lot of good people in politics who sadly have to bite their lip and, play to special interests. And a lot of these people on both sides are good friends. So it pains me. I went to an event the other night and I knew every single one of these men and women on both sides, but I was not allowed to speak because I was an independent. This was a Jewish forum in Denver. They had one of the two gubernatorials, both attorney generals, both treasurer candidates, attorney general candidates, both all four of the big selection, and they had a pair of congressional candidates from each area. And I went back and forth with them when I found out that we were not going to be invited to this, because most every forum we have gone to, we have spoken at, I've been invited to. And this one we were not. And it was pretty upsetting in the way they did it, because they, there's always these excuses, and one of them was, well, you don't represent a party that got 10% in the last election. I said, no independent has run in CD2 in something like 20 years. That should not matter. Look at our polling right now. Look at the numbers right now.
Right.
It's just excuse after excuse. But here's the negative I wanted to say. That one just kind of came out. Bernie Sanders is leaving on a 9-state tour. And one of them is to Colorado. And one of the things he will be doing in Colorado is coming to endorse Jared Polis, which is fine. Jared's a good guy. There's a Democrat and a Republican in that race. There's a Unity Party guy and there's a Libertarian, and both are polling at 1%. So fine. It's basically, that is a head-to-head, and he wants to support the Democrat. And so whether some of their issues are the same, fine. But his events are in Boulder, Fort Collins, and Denver. And Boulder and Fort Collins are both in my district. So I reached out and I said, I'm not asking for a Bernie endorsement. Not doing that. I'm a little more middle of the road. But even if it worked, this is not my focus. But if you endorse the Democrat in this seat, who is a corporate lawyer, who's taken $1.5 million from the DNC and the DCCC, including and taken money from oil and gas, when the biggest issue right now on the ballot is 112. 112 backs fracking up 2,500 feet from houses. We've had fires out here and explosions out here. We have the science that shows if you go between Boulder County and Weld County in this state, the moment you cross over that border, childhood mortality rates double. I I mean, it's very clear fracking is having an impact on people who live near these fracking sites. So amazingly, I'm the only candidate to endorse it, but because we're an energy state, that's where the money is.
Right.
And they're putting $30 million into fighting Initiative 112. So, and I'm the only one vocally endorsing it and fighting back at the congressional level.
Right.
My Democrat is not. And I've said, look, guys, if you come in here and endorse the guy who won't endorse 112 and is a corporate lawyer and only got on board probably with healthcare because now it's relevant, you know, and most importantly, has money, you know, according to Open Secrets, has taken money from the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, wow.
And what's the point of what Bernie's doing? Come on in, endorse Jared, but good Lord. And I got an email today, you know, the normal form email coming from the Bernie Sanders campaign saying he'll be endorsing Jared and come join Jared and him and Michael Bennet, our senator, and somebody else, a third name, and then the Democrat. And I thought, my God, they're going to do it. So I'm going to, you know, those events on Wednesday. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to be very curious if Bernie does the minimum and endorses the guy that we need to win for governor in this state, the guy with a 2040 policy, whether or not some people agree with him, and he hasn't endorsed 112, but we're an energy state, I understand. But whether or not he endorses the guy that in a safe seat can't endorse one of the most critical initiatives in our state of our time, and all this other stuff that Bernie talks about. So it'll be curious, but this is the corruption of party politics.
Right.
You have to pay your chits. Bernie can't run as an independent. He won't win. So if he wants to run for president, he's got to do it in the Democratic path, and he's got to pay his chits to get there. And how sad is that? And you see on both sides.
It's very sad.
Very. And I was a big Bernie supporter, but I did not... I was not happy when he decided to just get behind Hillary and all the corporate Dems. And I think a lot of people feel that way. People are paying more attention now. And that stuff matters. And we've got situations like, you know, Andrew Gillum, who as soon as he changes his rhetoric around Medicare for all, as soon as he's endorsed, or actually I guess that was kind of set that way all along, come to find out. But it's over and over again with every candidate that we think is going to represent the people, and it's just not good enough. So whether it's Bernie or whoever it is, it doesn't really matter. It's negative to have to talk about it and point it out, but it's the truth, and he should be, you know, it should be on the issues, not party.
And what bothers me is you don't even need to say this. You could say, I can't stand Medicare for all and get rid of the ACA and whatever else. Fine. If you're a candidate who believes this, fine.
Right.
But for Bernie to run on certain values and then come out here and possibly next Wednesday endorse candidates who clearly don't.
Right.
Specifically one in a safe seat.
Yeah.
In the gubernatorial, it's not safe.
Right.
You know, it's very tight. You want your tribe to win. You got to do it. That's fine. And you know, and Jared's a friend. I like Jared. I support Jared. At this point, absolutely. He hasn't asked for it, but there it is.
But if you can't stick to your principles
in a safe seat, right? Yeah. It's just that boggles me. It's been 13 months of this campaign, and we've gone down some very dark roads at certain moments. And the stuff you pick up, it almost makes you want to walk away and not even vote. I'm a candidate, and there's moments where you walk away and you go, I can't even imagine voting in a system that is so rigged against the majority of the population on both sides, conservative and liberal.
We'll get into that a little bit, because I've been kind of volunteering a little bit with Audit Elections USA. I'll get into that in a minute. But I did want to say, you know, about them saying that you didn't have, what was it, 10% of the vote or something? I mean, when you look at the fact that the largest group of people is non-voters, who's representing them? I mean, and I think it's candidates like you and the other guys, people we've had sign, candidates with a contract or contract for American Renewal, that are really trying to actually just represent the people and not special interests. It's those people that I think would really reach those non-voters and say, oh, they're speaking to me. They're actually going to represent me. But the problem is they also don't trust the election system with good reason. So, but we'll get into that. I'll save that for in a minute. But one of the things that Cenk said, and I kind of turned away from Bernie at about the same time I turned away from TYT, because I didn't like the fact that it was just all of a sudden, just everything flipped. They weren't covering, to me, it became an anti-Trump, beating the drum anti-Trump, and wasn't really covering the news anymore, and kind of trying to just herd everyone into voting Democrat. I'm a very strong independent myself, and that did not sit well with me. But one of the things that Cenk said that I almost laughed out loud was he asked you, how do you think you can get Republican votes? Like that was just, he couldn't imagine that. But it's so obvious to me how an independent would, the people that voted Republican, and like you said, that was a populist wave, the people that wanted Bernie, that was populism. Like it or not, Trump, yes, while the racist, misogynist people voted for Trump, there were also a lot of people that were just anti-establishment, fed up with everything, that voted for him as maybe just anti-Hillary, or they believed some of his rhetoric around whatever. But I just thought it was crazy how Cenk said that, like that would be so crazy for someone who voted Republican to vote independent. I mean, all you have to do is look at Thomas Frank's work and listen liberal and see.
Look at Obama's policies and how he left out a huge swath of the country. I mean, rural areas were really hurt badly during Obama's tenure in office, because his policies pretty much ignoring them.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk to candidates like yourself and people, we've had recently Green Party candidate in Utah. When you get out into the middle of the country, there's plenty of that. People understand. When you're just talking to people in the blue pockets on the coast, they don't seem to get it. And how strong this movement and support there would be for independence. And they may have been people that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump. I mean, I think that's just something that doesn't get covered in the media at all, because they want to keep that tribalism and the two parties system going.
So when I'm asked about running here from Democrats, I tell them you can't split the vote. It doesn't work in such a one-sided district, so you can actually vote your conscience, which is this rarity that you can make that argument. There's a lot of other good arguments to make for voting your conscience, but you can't split your vote in this seat. And actually, Nate Silver has just shown that. I'll just say, sadly, Nate Silver has given the Democrat a 99% chance of winning, and said the split would be 64 for the Democrat, 31 for the Republican, and then 6 or so for me and the Libertarian to split, which we've never pulled below 10. So I have issue with that alone. But if you're a Democrat, you usually appreciate Nate Silver's stuff. And if you're looking at Nate Silver's stuff right there, 64 to 31, that shows you that even if I was a second Democrat, we could evenly split this district right down the middle and still beat the Republican.
Right.
And I'm not a Democrat, and that's amazing.
Well, 538 turned out to be wrong on quite a bit, actually, in 2016.
Right. Well, and there's some, my Republican candidate, that all three guys, by the way, are good friends. I mean, the Republican I've known over the last year, the Democrat I've known for 10 years, the Libertarian I've gotten to know over this last 6 months. They're all good people. They're all very smart. We've actually had one of the most cordial, positive races you can met.
That's awesome.
There's certain things that bother me. There's a lot of issues that all three of them have that I disagree on. That's the beauty, but as long as we can talk about these things, great. And
that
the
would
Republican has pointed out a couple of his own that he's shown that he somehow wins. So, polls, right? After 2016, I don't know how anybody gives much credit.
No.
Right.
Well,
we do it for the media to take it seriously.
That would be a really interesting thing to get into if you like. Could you name, like, with each of those the Democrat, the Republican, and the Libertarian, what would be the number one thing with each one that you disagree on?
Well, okay, I'll answer that next. Let me say one other thing that I point out. Besides that split, this is per your Cenk question. Or Cenk question. The other funny thing is, wow, I've just blanked. So
that's okay. You've had a busy schedule. I was saying that was it about how he said, how could you possibly, or the way he said it sounded like, how could you possibly get Republicans to vote for you?
Exactly right. So the other side of it is, I think I might have mentioned, I hopefully mentioned to him on there, but this is what I tell most people is the other big thing is we're running on human issues. We're not running on red or blue issues, and that's what brings people across from both sides.
Yep.
Right. Climate change, I think, is one of the best examples of that. I endorse 112, and I actually go to all these meetings of the different cities and municipalities around me who are passing resolutions to endorse the Paris Climate Agreement and passing resolutions to go 100% renewable by 2025, up in Netherlands 2030, in Fort Collins 2035, and Breckenridge. I walk the walk. There has not been another candidate at these things, which also, that's a whole nother topic we could get into. But climate, which right now is considered this blue issue because some Republicans have, thrown a snowball in the well and said, oh, climate change doesn't exist, and others say science doesn't exist, and others say, yeah, they both exist, but it's not human caused. A lot of that, I think, is because they're playing to a base. They're placating a base. Just like I think more Democrats appreciate and will vote for 112 here, but won't endorse it because they're too worried about the special interests on the oil and gas side.
Okay.
But climate change, the Clean Air and Water Act was passed by Richard Nixon, a Republican. The National Park System was created by Roosevelt, a Republican. And hunters were known as some of the earliest environmental conservationists, now considered Republicans. I mean, these are human issues. And when Cenk asked that kind of question, when other people ask, how are you getting a whole lot of progressive Democrats and a whole lot of moderate Republicans who have lost their party? By the way, the Republican Party is dead. There is only the party of Trump. But the Democratic Party is a plane flying along on fire, and everybody's focused on who's sitting in first class.
Yeah, you did say that.
Both parties have their issues.
Analogy, yes.
I love this. Yes, I'm a pilot. As soon as that hit me, I thought that's the Democrats. So, these are human issues. These are human issues, and that's why you attract people from both sides. Now, per your question, what do I disagree? Well, I'm the furthest to the left on climate. I am a massive proponent, and this is, I think, why more than anything else, between Walker and Jared, our two gubernatorial candidates, who are both fine men and both have different strengths. And Walker's been our treasurer for some time, and Jared's been my congressman for some time. But the number one thing is Jared has laid out a plan to try to get Colorado renewable by 2040. And he's also done exactly what I love, what I've done on my own stump speech and campaign trail, and likened it to Kennedy sending a man to the moon in a decade. We did not know whether that was possible. We did not know whether humans could breathe outside the atmosphere, whether they would just simply die upon exiting Earth's atmosphere. But he said, let's do it. He made a statement, and it allowed Americans to dream and to work to achieve something. We could have fallen short. We did not. I think if you lay out a path to bring Colorado, a very forward-thinking state, renewable by 2040, which is clearly critical, and if you believe science, which 90% of people should, there's a few that don't, the IPCC has just told us we have 11 years to do this. So if you lay out something that says by 2040 we're going to do this, you may not hit it, maybe 2045, 2048, but at least you're setting a real goal, and then you start breaking it down and figuring out what are the steps we need to get there. I love that he's done that.
Right.
It's absolutely critical. And that's why, I endorse these kind of things, and that's why I would say I disagree with all three of the others on this. It is not only critical, but it shouldn't just be talked about. We need to see action.
Right.
All four of us actually agreed on giving Dreamers a path to citizenship, and 3 out of 4 of us, not the Republican, but amazing little libertarian, 3 out of 4 of us agree on a carbon tax being one of the things that should get us. Yeah, I love that our libertarian supports that. He wants it to be a tax neutral by removing some other stuff, but he supports it, which is great. Guns is another one. I'm not going to say that I agree with any of them on this. When we see a school shooting come around, the Democrats come out, let's start with the Republicans come out and say thoughts and prayers and issue closed. The Democrats come out and say, well, if we ban AR-10s and we ban AR-15s, which they've deemed assault rifles, then, all the shootings will end. Well, of course not.
Right.
And by using the word assault rifle and creating that context, that's something the Republicans have rallied against the Democrats on, which is crazy. Bloomberg's actually been able to shut down 116 of the dirtiest coal-fired power plants around the country by not mentioning climate change and just talking about fiscal reasons. And he's open to fracking, so we have some disagreements there. But, think about wordage, think about verbiage, think about certain things that upset the other side.
Yep. Trigger words.
What's that?
They're trigger words. I mean, that's just how people react.
Right.
Yeah.
But on this issue, gun control or gun rights, gun control, whatever you want to call it. In reality, school shootings, yes, I think in general, in a modern first world, forward-thinking society, you should not have AR-10s and AR-15s. You should not have bump stocks legal. You should close the background check loopholes. You should have a red flag bill.
Yeah.
Right.
But now, consider that smart, common sense gun legislation not something that's going to fix a shooting in a school. That shooting is caused by culture. We have been devolved. Right. We are getting, this cyclical cycle of hate and us versus them and crazy mentalities of how it's okay to lash out at people. It's okay to I know it's really funny that Tipper Gore back in the day got a lot of blowback from blaming video games, but honestly, that's a part of it too. There's a lot of different parts of this thing where we have made violence in our society, and clearly war has to do with it. We're in 11 armed conflicts. But we are in a place where we have allowed for us to devolve into a system where young kids are not taken care of. Bullying is normal and prevalent and accepted.
Right.
And if you take away an AR-10 and AR-15, which we should, they will find a handgun. Then they will find a knife. Then they will run you over in the school parking lot with a car. If there's a kid who is that mentally hurt and ostracized and thrown off and having mental health issues that we're not taking care of, by taking away a weapon, sorry, Democrats, that's not going to solve your issue.
Well, there's just refusal on both sides to look at certain things. I mean, liberals don't want to look at the fact that, if a 3-year-old is watching Call of Duty, I mean, it's just, as a parent, I can see that. Like, that's going to have an effect. And they refuse to look at that at all. It drives me crazy. But on the other side, I mean, there's so much that both sides do agree on, the polling shows, but I think the one issue where they didn't was that on the assault rifle, that both sides agreed, and I'm not talking politicians, I mean the public, on those common sense gun reforms, but it was the assault rifle, like getting rid of that they didn't. And I got to make the joke again, Brian. I love the way David Letterman put it. Was after one of the shootings. He said, why do we have these? Like, why, unless you've got Bigfoot at your bird feeder, why in the world do we need these guns? So I think it's another one of those issues where there's not just one reason for it all. But yes, absolutely, the pervasive violence. I mean, the things that kids are watching at younger and younger age, and they become desensitized to that. I find it's odd. I'm very whatever, liberal, progressive, whatever the word is, but I often found myself agreeing with the more conservative parents when it came to what our kids were allowed to watch and things like that, because I filtered those things out, you know.
I've worked with the Martin Luther King Center for the past 15 years. It was actually Coretta Scott King, who was my surrogate grandmother, who launched me in the political career. But I remember this last January at the Martin Luther King Salute to Greatness dinner. This is a moment when we are celebrating the life of one of the most prolific nonviolent leaders ever.
Right.
And one of the people working with us, I look over at her son sitting there next to me. He's got his phone, and he's got one of these just shoot 'em up video games that he's playing on his phone, where he's running through as some army soldier, like taken apart. And we are sitting here listening to some speaker, like, you know, Cornel West wasn't there that year, but somebody along these lines talking about, you know, we're saying what we think needs to be said without internalizing the message or realizing
what's going on right there.
Your kid is playing one of the most violent, a video game far more violent than anything that was available when I was a child.
Right.
Yes.
But then
and you're doing it here.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And people, the disconnect there, that people don't see that as having anything to do with any of it, is just mind-boggling. But, you know, that being said, sometimes you can say it's them not paying attention. Other times, you know, I have a friend who's a single mom with three boys, and she's working all the time. And, you know, there are situations where people are like that, and the video games become a babysitter, or TV, and with so much of it just saturated with all this violence, it's really hard to filter all that out, you know? I mean, even they get bombarded with YouTube, you know, just an ad for something really violent. And I'm not saying that we should ban all of that. I think it's just we have to recognize that it does have an effect on especially very young children. So I don't get off on that topic too much, but there's a guy I really want to bring on at some point to interview once we kind of get past the midterms. It's the Children's Media Health Center at Harvard, and he goes by the Mediatrician, and he talks a lot about this kind of thing. So anyway, as a mom, something I care a lot about. But okay, I wanted to actually ask you more about the proxy vote. Unless there was anything else, did I? Oh, wait. What was the one? So it was
X, Y, Z, or Z,
Y, and Z.
Y and Z.
Yeah, I'll just mention Y and Z is, you know, just like 112 is, if you read the recent Washington Post article, by the way, it happened a day or two ago, which I'm in, by the way. That was very cool. They picked up a photo of us, no quotes or anything, but there was a recent Washington Post article that said 112 is ground zero for this movement to seriously move us toward renewables, which is awesome. Wow. Colorado's always been one of these places. We create pot, cannabis, marijuana was legalized first in Boulder before Colorado, before all the other states. You know, we're a testing ground for a lot of different things, some good ideas, some bad ideas. But one of the other things that we are pushing is Y and Z. And I was actually one of the first endorsers of this. It's an anti-gerrymandering initiative. I was one of the first 10 endorsers when it was very contentious. And now the two big groups have come together. And I just got an email from the Republican Party today of Colorado endorsing Y and Z and telling all the Republicans to endorse it.
Wow.
And I got a email before that from the League of Women Voters saying, I mean, they actually helped fashion the legislation, but they endorse it. And so it's very clearly going to pass. It's good for everyone.
Wow.
But it will set forth, instead of making it nominated by politicians, it'll set forth a panel of 12, all complicated, but basically based on judges. We'll get to choose, and it's not current judges, it's retired judges. We'll put together this panel of 12 chosen by Americans from Coloradans from all over the state who are not current politicians, who are not lobbyists, who have not done this, that, and the other. And it'll be 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 independents.
Wow.
And
Wow.
in order to sign off on the final map,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the majority, but that majority has to include at least 2 independents. So for the first
Wow.
time, the unaffiliated or independent voice will ring strong,
Mm-hmm.
That's
and
impressive.
it takes it more or less, well, pretty much, it takes it out of the hands of politicians
Mm-hmm.
and puts it in the hands of citizens watched by judges with, you know, going through the whole thing, almost like picking, what is it called? A jury. It's almost like picking a jury.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very cool. And
Wow.
it's pretty clear it'll probably pass. And when it passes, I think that will be ground zero on how a lot of other states do it too. Because
That is
clearly gerrymandering is a horrific process
Yes.
across
Mhm.
a lot of states.
Mm-hmm.
Laughable in some and depressing in others.
Yeah, right, right.
So yeah, Y and Z, and if you're a Coloradan, I don't even have to say this one. If you're a Coloradan, vote for 112. We need to get that across the line. But if you're a Coloradan, we're going to pass Y and Z. Vote for it anyway. But this is going to be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about the environmental issues. Another thing we've noticed talking to candidates, you know, I think for a lot of people, it's not a big issue. People that are, you know, working paycheck to paycheck, they can't be concerned about a lot of these, you know, the polar ice caps melting. But when you've got fracking, you know, right in your backyard, and we talked to, who was it, James Singer in, was that Utah?
Jonathan Singer.
Jonathan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Wait, from Colorado or
No, from Utah. Wasn't that James Singer? James
Could
Singer.
it be
It's
James?
okay.
We have a Jonathan Singer. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, but it was interesting how, you know, he said, no, it's all sides that care about the environmental issues. When it's in your backyard, it becomes very different than, you know, telling someone that can't, you know, pay their bills. You need to be concerned about the polar ice caps melting. I mean, it's easy to understand why people don't care about that, or they can't. They're too, you know, concerned about their immediate needs, or what's in their, you know, immediate environment. But yeah, I think it's interesting that when you get talking about stuff that's happening locally, when the candidate's talking about what's happening there, whether it's fracking or some pollution or then it really is it becomes nonpartisan because it affects everyone. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. But so okay, about this proxy vote, I loved your response to Jank about that, because he said something else, and this is my last picking on Jank. But so he basically said he was kind of alluding to that it would be bad to be able to let the majority of people like vote on something. Like, what I think his example was, what if the majority could do something like, you know, vote separate families? Like, then what would you do? Do you remember that part of it? And you said, well, your response was that you would explain to your constituents why, like if they had voted through that proxy vote.
Yeah. So anybody who's watching, and this has gone on for a while, so I appreciate anybody who's on here. This is good. I appreciate you guys bringing this up. But Proxy Vote is a phenomenal app that's been created by a guy named Alex Eber, who is Edward Sharp of Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros. So he's a phenomenal musician who's won a lot of awards in his own right in his industry, but is one of the many people coming out of all sorts of industries who've said, hey, I need to get involved in politics, and here's something I can do. Mm-hmm. And he brought in a guy named Ted, who created an app called Capitol Bells, which basically just tells you when a piece of legislation is being voted on. And what they did was they used Capitol Bells and that information and brought it into Proxy Vote. And Proxy Vote, anybody in the country, and if you're watching, download Proxy Vote and then push your legislator to get on Proxy Vote. Proxy Vote's a fantastic platform, but it allows anybody to see in real time what is being voted on in the U.S. House and where your congressman lies, where they're going to vote. Mm-hmm. And you can actually have discussions with us ahead of time, where I'll lay out on my app what my different positions are on legislation, and people can vote on whether to support or go against. And I didn't make this clear enough, apparently, on my Reddit. We did an AMA on Reddit, and it was overall pretty positive, besides a number of people trying to eviscerate me for saying I would just vote whatever the heck it said, period, and what was the point of even having the job. Proxy vote is a tool. It is a powerful tool. It is the first time we can really democratize democracy and show how people feel in your district, your constituents, how they actually feel, with data-driven analysis to back it up, to prove it, which has not happened before. But at the same time, it is only a tool. And as I said to Jane, if my population, for some reason, decided to vote to tell me that I should vote against, I want to say something absurd, but even if it's not absurd, if they might tell me vote against funding NASA because we should never go to the moon again. One of the most important things to me is continuing to support NASA. I actually was pretty upset that Obama defunded it, and I love that Trump has refunded it, funded it again, even though he's now added with it a military branch.
Yeah.
I need water.
Space Force.
What?
Space Force.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. But if my constituents all got together and said, vote against NASA, we never want to land another person on the moon, we never want to reach for the stars again, morally, I think that's wrong. I would have to say, sorry, I'm voting for this, and now you can vote me out of office.
Right. Right.
The point of it is to inform your decisions and have a better understanding of where your people, your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors lie, versus a just assumption, which is what most Congress people do. But it is not an end all.
Right. Well, it made me think of, like, you hear this argument, oh, we can't let that happen. We can't actually let the people choose because they might have chosen to keep slavery or to not allow gay marriage and stuff like that. And so I thought that was a great answer what you gave. Like, if it is something that is just immoral, then I'm going to say no, and this is why. But on the flip side, I thought to myself, well, gee, the way we've got it now, where the big moneyed interests just make the decisions, and that goes against everybody, you don't have health insurance or whatever. How is that? Or we can just pollute your backyard. How is that like a moral thing either? So, but, okay, so before we keep you for, 2 hours, I figured this would be a good conversation, but I have to do something and show a screen share here of, as I said, I'm doing some work with Audit Elections USA, and they are currently, they're just trying to get people to follow the law, which is to save ballot images. So I spoke to John Brakey of Audit Elections USA just before we came on, to ask him about specifically
John Brackney from Colorado?
No, John Brakey. He's an election integrity activist. It's Audit Elections USA.
Cool.
And they're doing a lot of great work. Recently, they received a letter from a voting machine maker, ES&S, threatening to sue them for posting the manual and pictures of the voting machine on their website. So some of these, they'd like to keep what they do private, I guess. But anyway, so this is verified voting, and anyone can go to it. You click here and go on verifier, and then you can go to your state. Well, basically, Colorado, as you know, I didn't know, is all vote by mail. That kind of means, to quote John, he said, all the counting is in the dark. But then we looked down here at what is used. Let's see, Dominion.
So, before you say all vote by mail, because I don't fully understand the language used on this, everybody gets a mail-in ballot, but you can also go to the polls.
Okay, right. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And our polls open on October 22nd. Early voting begins at the polls and closes on election day. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot to learn. I'm still learning all of the, all these different voting machines and how all of it works. It's a lot to take in, but I just wanted to show that, and to anybody that wants to see what's there in their state, you can go and check. But one of the things that they're doing and one of the things I'm trying to help with is to get candidates to file what's called a records request. So in Tim Canova's case, there were some things didn't look right, so he decided to request to see the ballots. Well, after he sued to see the ballots, they actually destroyed them. So So, but what happens in these cases where a candidate maybe they thought they were really close and it comes back, way off what their own numbers are. If they speak out about it, they're kind of labeled a sore loser. It's a big ordeal. They don't really know what to do. And the idea, what we're trying to promote, is to get candidates, and actually any citizen can do it, but to get candidates to just file a public records request. And it's not to prove cheating, that any cheating happened. It's to try to restore faith in and show that our elections are real. And if they know that this is their candidate is requesting this, so that they'll have to provide the ballot images and other audits. It becomes something then that is not. It just becomes the norm. And people, then it restores that faith in the election. So we're actually going to be working on, I think, a press release where a candidate could say, I'm going to be doing this and this is why. And so you could look into it and see.
Yeah, send the info to me. I'd be happy to look into it.
Yeah, they have lawyers working on stuff now, but right now it's like, you don't know. It's just this black hole. And how do you know what's really happening? Where do you get receipts for your vote? And in your case,
I'm optimistic, but I think in Colorado we have less. I don't know many arguments that have been made about voter fraud here, and certainly you want to keep fighting to make sure it doesn't happen. But we seem to have less issues at the polls than some other states, and it could be because we're a homogenous state. It could be because we're a one-sided district, very gerrymandered districts. It could be, I mean, you could have all kinds of different excuses, but of what I know, it seems so far generally positive.
Okay.
Although I like the idea of keeping it that way. In the primary, because I wasn't a part of the primary, I went and requested a tour of my local voting place for Boulder County. And went in and watched how they bring in the envelopes, which I've actually got one right here. This is.
So I guess that's.
They bring them in and how they cut them open at a certain time with certain people there. So all the mail-in ballots are sealed. They're signed in two places, and they're not allowed to be opened until this moment where there's a certain amount of people there, and then they open them up together and they cut them together and they run them through the voter machines together. So it seemed like it was an interesting process, but it's not something I know as much as I should. And I will say this, the one thing I do know is one of the best places that we could go to make it free and open and fair elections is blockchain. Moving our voting systems to an open blockchain, not a controlled blockchain by the state, which would lead to the same problems we have.
Right.
But I think if you have an open blockchain system with open source code and make it's non-corruptible in a sense if you have it in open source with the ledger.
Right.
And I think if you had an open source ledger blockchain voting system, we would get away from a lot of the problems we have right now.
I have heard lots about that. I think what this group right now is trying to do is just to get states to follow the law as it is now, which is they're supposed to be saving the ballot images, and it's something like only 4 out of 44 that have the machines that save the ballot images are actually doing it. So yeah, they're just trying to get them to follow the law now. And I do want to just point out there's some confusion. People hear voter fraud and election fraud is two very different things. So, voter fraud, Trump had this committee or whatever on voter fraud, and we know it's really virtually non-existent. I mean, people aren't running around voting twice. That's not the problem. The problem is these election officials aren't, and it may not even, it's not that it's all nefarious. It's just they're not being told, okay, you need to make sure the machines are saving these ballot images. So when you go to do an audit, it's not traceable. So anyway, that's what we're trying to encourage candidates to do, is to ahead of time, you can do it now, is to file a public records request. And if you're interested in doing it, I'll send you they're working on templates for different states. But when it becomes routine, then people just accept it, and it will also, if there is anything that might have happened that was shady, just knowing that they're going to have to, provide this, hopefully it's preventive, and
measures.
That's the idea. So there's more to come on that, and actually Candidates with a Contract is going to be working more to sort of add a more organized pledge sort of addition to election integrity pledge, so that if things happen like Tim Canova's race, you've got people on the ready, activists and lawyers that are there to help, because unfortunately that's what we need. But the idea is to get the public to, maybe that largest group of people that don't vote, a lot of them, you ask them why, and they say because it doesn't matter. They don't trust the election system.
Right.
So that would change that. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you've got a very packed schedule, and I'm just so glad you took the time to come on and talk to us. And we didn't really get too much into the actual contract, but Candidates with a Contract. But needless to say, it's anti-corruption, and I can see that that's what you're about, and you're to represent the people. So I'll let you close out here.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this, and I'm happy to continue the conversation at another point. Please send me that info. But these are critical issues that we need to keep bringing to people's attention, keep bringing people who care about them on board, and keep having these conversations on where do we go from here? How do we improve our system? How do we do the best by every voter, constituent, and people who don't vote? How do we play to our better angels? So the two thoughts I'll close out on are, one, final thing for people to look up is the Reformers Caucus.
Okay.
And this is based at it. So issue 1, the Reformers Caucus, they just launched a brand new thing in Philadelphia, something like 6 months ago. I happened to be lucky enough to be the only candidate nationwide that was present in Constitution Hall when they did this. And the Reformers Caucus is currently something like 206 past governors, Congress people, and ambassadors who have said that the major issue, the most corrupting issue in politics right now is the money, and we need to get the money out. And they're doing a great job with that. So issue 1, the Reformers Caucus. The second thing I'd say is, in my district, I make you make case to different people depending on what speaks to them. So you can share with the Republicans, you're not going to have another voice than looking at an independent. You can share with the Democrats, hey, you can actually vote on your conscience. And you can share with the independents, you finally have somebody. There's a reason 209,000 of you versus the 175 Dems and the 133 Republicans. There's a reason 209,000 of you have chosen to register as unaffiliated or independent. We're angry with the system. We're fed up, and you finally have somebody who you can vote for, who you can believe in, who has the same message.
And you have same-day registration, right?
We do.
Okay.
We do. So this is a sell to the voters when anything is brought up like splitting the vote or whatever else. But that all being said, I think we need to say one thing, especially in a conversation like this, on the higher issue. Yes, in a tight race, I'm running in a lopsided race, so there's no danger to anybody. But in a tight race where it's 50-50, governor's race would be if an independent was running. In a tight race, if you have a credible, serious independent or libertarian or green, they end up sometimes upsetting the vote and causing one person to win and not the other. And I'm speaking in instances like Ross Perot costing George H.W. Bush his second term. Jill Stein was the recent costing, and Ralph Nader. And here's my biggest problem with that fallacy. 45 to 50% of people don't even turn out to vote.
Exactly.
And so when people say, when people blame the 2% who voted for Jill Stein, or the few for Nader, or the few for Ross Perot, when nearly half the country didn't even turn out,
right?
They're putting their anger in the wrong place. They're putting their focus in the wrong place, and they are totally confused on how to actually solve the problem, and they are helping drive further people away.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
It doesn't apply in my district, and yet every time I hear it, it is such a terrible thing to say splitting the vote.
It's it's vote shaming. I'm convinced it's just a tactic that's been used by the two-party system, and it trickles down, and people that are angry when their side doesn't win, then they use it. But I voted for 2 of those of the 3 that you mentioned, so.
And that's great. There's, I know I worked a little bit with independent voting, not Independent Voting Network, but who's our group at Jackie Salet in New York?
Jackie Salet.
Do you know Jackie Salet?
Are you talking about IVN?
Yeah, IVN.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. With Jackie Salet in New York, and they basically they were big proponents of that not Perot. They were big proponents of They were on the Perot campaign, and then they also helped with the Bloomberg campaign.
Right.
And I have so much respect for them for doing these. I have respect for you for taking those 2 votes, because the funniest thing, it is so funny to me that our psychology tells us if you hadn't voted at all, I wouldn't give you crap. But because you chose to vote, you took the time, you learned about it, you went to the polls, and you voted your conscience, then you're wrong. And you cost me this, that, and the other.
Right. It makes no sense.
It's so upsetting. That is so upsetting.
Yeah, and it makes no sense either. But
so I don't think we can have a conversation without saying that. But besides that, thank you for having me on. Reach out anytime. For those watching or who watch later, I can be reached at nick@nickthomasforcongress.com. Our line is 720-770-1776. Give me a call.
Ah, cool.
NickThomasForCongress.com. Look at the Facebook. Shoot us questions. I talk to everybody. I tell people, particularly in Colorado, as the only independent running in any of the 7 congressional races in Colorado, I represent everyone, even if only CD2 votes for me. And if I end up being the only independent to win, or Marty ends up being the only independent to win, we're representing 42% of Americans.
Yep.
So we represent you as well. So
wait, 44.
Get involved. What?
It's 44.
Is it 44 now?
It's 44. Yeah.
It's rising.
And climbing. That was January.
We're going to see some degree of a blue wave right now. It may be big, it may be small, but there's going to be some degree of a blue wave, as there always is in a midterm with the opposing team.
Yeah.
We're also going to see a female wave right now, and I think that's great. I think we do need more voices that aren't white men. Ironic that I'm running, but I do think I'm the best person for the job in this. But so we're going to see a female wave. We are also going to see an independent wave, and we're not going to see a big one right now. But boy, 2020 is going to be fascinating.
It's coming. Well, we're gonna follow up post election too and keep this going. We hope to keep building more candidates, and there may be more that ran as Dem, as the underdog, and they decide to do what Sander and Tim Canova did and just say, I'm out, I'm running as an independent. And if they do, we're behind them. And so, we just keep fighting.
Yep.
All right, I'll send you the template for the public records request. Email probably is best, I guess, right? For that?
Congress.com.
Okay. Got it.
And I'll throw a couple of these links on the Facebook page later too.
Okay,
for
great.
That stuff discussed.
Okay,
I posted a number of links already. Your Facebook page,
Thank you.
Proxy Vote, and a few others. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I hope mention Proxy Vote to other candidates you have these conversations.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
hope more people get on board with this.
I can't believe I hadn't heard about it. I kept talking about this Me Vote thing, but it's in Australia, so I mean, I guess it could be used. But it's basically the same concept.
Well, this is new. I'm their first candidate. I think they've added 4 or 5 more in the last couple months.
Wow.
But I was their first candidate. It's a new thing. It's a necessary thing. And
I'll definitely talk about it. Okay, well, it was so great to meet you, and talk again sometime.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, good night.
Good night.
Here we go.